In this video, we're going to talk about, should I buy property now or wait for the Australian property market to crash? G'day, George Samios here from MAD, where we make it easy for everyday Australians to achieve their version of financial freedom. Well, let's look in the past to help us make a decision about the future. In the last 12 months alone, Brisbane property prices have increased over 30%. We superseded our friends down south in Victoria, who had a 20% increase, and in New South Wales, a 27% increase. That really shows where the Queensland property market is going. So let's break that down. If you had a $1 million property 12 months ago, you have probably made over $300,000. Now look, that equity is in your house. It's not in your bank account, but you can still use that equity for future dealings. Now, if you had $10 million of property, you've made $3 million while you were sleeping. That's pretty cool. Now, you're watching this not to hear that stuff. You're watching this to say, should I buy now or is the property market going to crash? Well, look, let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Number one, interest rates rising seem to be inevitable. Every economist seems to be saying they're going to increase. This will have a direct impact on mortgage repayments, could cause mortgage stress, and could cause some people who've over-leveraged to sell their houses, which in turn could be an oversupply and not enough demand, which could have a direct impact on property prices. Some other things to look out for is the increased rising cost of living. Going to fuel up costs more than it did. Going to get groceries, buying a coffee, we're all seeing it. The cost of living has increased. And put that on with rising interest rates, definitely could have an impact on property prices. And thirdly, which is very, very bad, is the overseas war. Hopefully things do not progress to get worse. Hopefully Australia does not get involved. But if there is a war and we're involved, along with the above 2 points, this could have a big impact on property prices in Australia. But what's your options? Owning or renting? Now let's do some numbers to break it down for you. Let's use Seven Hills, where we are in Queensland, as an example. If you rent a property in Seven Hills now for $850 per week, you times that by 52 weeks, times it by 10 years, you would have paid over $500,000 in rent versus buying a property in Seven Hills. Let's say we buy a property for $1 million. We get a mortgage for 30 years, principal and interest at a rate of 2.2%. The repayment is similar per week, but in 10 years' time, you would have paid off $250,000 of your mortgage. So what we know for sure is if you rent, you'll definitely be out of pocket $500,000 with no asset behind you. Whereas if you buy a property and you pay it off over 10 years, you would have paid 25% of it off, meaning you've got equity. Plus, if we look in the past, the last 10 years in Seven Hills, the average property was $623,000 in 2013 versus last year was $1.242 million. That's almost a double. So let's finish off by saying, should I rent or should I buy? Well, renting in 10 years in this suburb will cost you over $500,000 and you won't own an asset. Whereas if I buy a property and pay a mortgage off for the next 10 years, I would have paid a good chunk of it off, and hopefully it would have increased like it has in the previous 10 years. I want to also finish off by saying, if you're watching this and you're in Brisbane, there's a lot of good things happening in our area. Huge amount of money is being spent on underground tunnels and infrastructure, highways, casinos, and the upcoming Olympics. A lot of things are happening in these suburbs and this state. I'm very optimistic about Brisbane. And what's your other option? Renting? Well, I just showed you what that looks like. I hope you got some valuable information from this video. Make sure you like and subscribe us to keep getting more content like this. Thank you and have a mad day.